Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Camardo. I'm the Program Manager and Director of Finance for CBTS, the Cross-Border Threat Screening and Supply Chain Defense, DHS Center of Excellence. Thank you for joining our CBTS Distinguished Speaker Series today, titled Major Enhancement of U.S. Swine Industry Biosecurity, How On-Farm Biosecurity Pig and Vehicle Movement Data Explain Between Farm Disease Dissemination. We're excited to host Dr. Gustavo Machado here today. He's an assistant professor at North Carolina State University. Dr. Machado is presenting on behalf of the Orion Bio Integrated Science Project and North Carolina Central University project team. This is in association with the current ongoing CBTS Orion project that's titled A Data-Driven Risk-Based Enterprise for Operational Decision. It's a 24-month project effort that's been ongoing since September of 21. So quick little bit about Dr. Machado. He's a 2010 graduate of Vet College at the Federal University of Santa Maria, Brazil. He developed machine learning tools applied to epidemiology while pursuing his PhD in 2016. And in 2016, he held a position as an assistant professor in the Department of Preventative Veterinary Medicine of the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. He subsequently completed a postdoc associate position in the veterinarian population medicine department at the University of Minnesota. And in 2018, he was appointed as an assistant professor in the Department of Population Health and Pathobiology at the North Carolina State University College of Vet Med to lead a research team on transboundary epidemiology. His primary focuses are investigating the occurrence and spread of animal infectious diseases, especially those transboundary diseases, providing science-based support for decision-making concerning prevention and control. Currently, Dr. Machado's research is focused on mathematical modeling and traditional statistics for practical mapping of the spread of infectious diseases among pig population. So that's just a little bit. He's obviously an expert here. I'm going to go ahead and let him get into it. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Gustavo Machado.
Great, thanks so much, Chris, for the introduction. And so I'm going to try to summarize this first title here into pieces on what has been done and where we're going after 5 years of working on this problem, on trying to understand how disease is spread between pig farms with endemic diseases in preparation for animal disease. So my presentation is going to be broken into motivation, general methods that we use to generate these estimates of transmission, results, and then how we utilize those results to then simulate interventions. And then the final item is then all the effort we have been putting on for the last 3 years to develop biosecurity plans across the country to then further test them against the dissemination of disease between farms. So my lab is funded through these agencies, and we are really focused on trying to understand how endemic diseases is spread between farms, since we have a strong partnership with the industry across the country, and learning from those lessons, then preparing for animal disease. And we are particularly interested in understanding how farm-level biosecurity measures can actually curb the spread of disease, and that's something that we are just starting to get some conclusions of. So our stakeholders are basically across the country. This is a picture of the movement of pigs interstate. So the color represents the amount of movement for the past 3 years. And the dark shade in the states represents the number of pigs moving within the state line. So we put a lot of effort here on this one, trying to help the industry to organize this data. And of course, for us to understand how things spread between farms, we really need to look into the networks. So, of course, we are in North Carolina, so we have a lot of collaboration here in North Carolina. We're talking about 100 million pigs in the streets moving between farms in the past 3 years. And really, it's not my work. this is really the work of a team, and without the members on the lab here, we'd be able to do anything, to be honest. So really appreciate their effort and putting all these things together. I'm going to show you today. So I just want to tie this to these facts that the administration has put out some more efforts on trying to prepare and trying to enhance defense at the farm levels, trying to reduce and protect our food supply chain. So it is hand-to-hand what we are trying to do here in order to understand how things are actually diseases that are already circulating and constantly spreading, so then we can be better prepared when we eventually might have foreign disease coming to the country. And on that perspective, we've been looking into how things spread between farms since 2019. So we first learned more about how epidemic diseases were transmitting between farms, and we look into more endemic diseases. And one of the diseases that we work very closely is PRRS, which is basically porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus, which has been circulating in the country for more than 20 years. So we kind of been tightening up the understanding of how that spread, but we haven't yet been able to reconstruct the whole transmission pathway for that disease. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today, how we've done that so far and what are the next steps for us there. We know that for animal diseases, especially in swine systems, 80% of the transmission of diseases can be explained basically by moving animals between farms. Swine systems are quite vertical, so breeding farms send pigs to the nurseries and send pigs to the finishers. So if the breeding is infected, we expect it to spread throughout the system. And this has also been demonstrated in other systems such as cattle and other commodities as well. And we know that the core pathways of between farm transmissions can be divided into two major categories. One is indirect transmissions, which is basically associated with local transmission, which is the distance between farms, basically, in the simple way. And also the transportation, the vehicles that move between farms, moving animals or feed and people. And the direct transmission pathway is very clear. We understand well, pigs moving between farms, fomites, things like that. And really what we don't know too much still is more in the direct transmission pathway. So we don't know exactly how vehicles are contributing for that spread to happen. And more importantly, there's a lot of conversations about on-farm biosecurity, having a cleaning station and all else good things there to protect the farms, but looking at that in a systematic manner, and then use that in a transmission model to then actually test that against endemic disease is something that hasn't been done yet, and that's what we're trying to do. And on those ways that things spread between farms, so often, we want farms to be susceptible, not to be infected. But unfortunately, farms become infected through different pathways. So infected pigs moving, the distance between farms, accumulation of virus or bacteria within the farm, the vehicles, even contaminated feed. So we know that, for example, animals, we can directly manage those. We can avoid infected farms to move animals to non-infected farms. Yeah, so that's doable. We know that vehicles also play a role, so we can do disinfection on those vehicles in between farms, so manageable as well. We can do direct management of infection by vaccination or feedback, which is sort of a vaccination procedure that the companies or the vets would do to try to bring all the animals to the same infection status. But the question is still on the biosecurity, what are actually the top main things that I should be doing, or every farm should be doing at minimum, if we wanted to reduce the chances of that farm to become infected. So that's what we're going to be looking at, how we're going to get there. So there is a program which is voluntary in the country, and farms are required to have a map to map the features of the biosecurity of that farm. So for example, this feature here, this green diamond represents basically a cleaning station. The trash is placed there, the parking lot where animals are disposed, and then other things associated to the farm. So this data has been now being collected for quite some time, but we really don't know. Question is, we don't know how much actually a cleaning station can actually reduce the chance of this farm to actually become infected. So, but we're gonna get there at the end of the presentation. So to get there, the methods that we use to try to approach that is this. Basically, we develop a stochastic transmission model where we have farms across the country. We exactly know what they are and many other information. And we're trying to understand the force, as we call the force, or the rate of transmission that makes a farm going from susceptible to infected, and then with some detection rate to become an outbreak, so then they are reported to us. Yeah. So we look into including the movement of pigs between farms as one of the pathways, the local transmission, which is driven by the distance between farms, again, against that susceptible farm in the middle there, other dynamics inside the farm, and looking at all the transportation networks. So I'm going to show you how we do that. But basically, we collect the exact number of pigs that go into farms, the exact trucks that go into those farms, when, and how often. And even the amount of food, feed, basically, that goes into the farms that can have a chance of transmission, such as fat and meat and bones. And there is, all this goes into pig spread, which is a model that we've been building. And there are some publications associated to that can share at the end. I'm not going to explain the whole math here, but there is many parameters to this model. But we're really focusing now at, right now at this current state, there is no interventions. Yeah, there is just a transmission without, we know that maybe this farm here has a very strong biosecurity, but we haven't yet included in trying to understand this transmission rate here. So how we do this thing for the local transmission is basically we measure distance between farms, and the closer the farm is from an infected farm, the more chances that farm is to become infected. It's very interesting that we still don't know too much what's happened between a few kilometers away from the farm, but we are able to model this with the data that we have. Second pathway that we have in this model is the movement of pigs. So this plot represents, each dot represents a farm, each line represents an edge, so it means that there's connection between the farms. And this is basically how dense the network is in 2 years of one particular region of the US. In addition, we are also looking into the vehicle's GPS data. So we know that trucks go to a farm, and they're going to drive to the next farm to pick it up or drop off their animals, and eventually they're going to go to a cleaning station. And we know that by visiting a farm, they're likely to carry some infections in their tires and other locations. So we include that in our transmission model as well. So we follow every truck, and we have estimated the contribution of actually doing a cleaning in between farms. Again, there's many more details here that I'm going to cover, but that's how we include explicitly the vehicles in our transmission model. So then what we learn, and as I said, I'm going to show you high-level things that we can discuss at the end. When we look at the contact networks of pigs and trucks, it's quite obvious that the amount of farms that trucks connect are much greater than pigs. Yeah, pigs gonna leave some time in one farm and then gonna go to the next farm. While the truck network is well connected, there's many farms to serve. So you can see here, basically, we can even see the edges in the middle of this network, but because it's so well connected. So that's one of the things that we should be a bit concerned or try to understand better. I'm going to show you how we've done that. Our model is a stochastic model, and we need to calibrate this against epidemic. So these red dots are basically the average number of outbreaks of PRRS virus. And what I'm showing here is just a representation of a few runs to show you that we, at some time after we introduce the infection in our population, the model capture more or less the epidemic curve of that for those weeks. So that's how we need, in this model, the stochastic model, so we need to calibrate against some data. So this is data we use. And basically, we have access to outbreak data in some partnership with some other universities. So we know when farms are infected and when they are no longer infected. So we're able to do that. Of course, model to try to capture an outlier, a week that had 30 outbreaks, is quite impossible. So for that reason, our model runs every week. Here are the 52 weeks of the year. So there are some weeks that the model does very well. So the bigger this line is to the one, the most close the model is able to capture which farms are to become infected the next week. An average overall, our accuracy of this model at this point is about 0.7. So 0.7 times, 70 times, the model is able to understand how things will spread in the next week. So we have some sort of trust of what we are estimating, basically. And so from that model, we're able to estimate something like this. So here in the vertical line is the transmission rates from 0 to 1. And on top here are all those pathways that I show you in the first plot. So red means local transmission. So it means the distance between farms. So we estimate this for every single week of the year. And then by exclusion, we demonstrate the proportion of those routes contributing to the new infections for those weeks. These are for sow farms, yeah? So you see that overall, over a full year of time, 32% of the sow farms outbreaks could be explained by the distance between farms, 28% by the pigs moving between farms, 12% by the vehicles transporting feed, and 20% of the vehicles transporting animals, and very tiny bit contribution of the feed that is delivered to these farms. So, and other routes are a bit irrelevant, are less than 3%. So with these results, we're able to provide to the stakeholders guidance of which week and when they expect to see a lot of things spreading through the distance. Basically, they cannot do much about that other than enhancing the biosecurity. And there is some weeks that's very clear contribution of the movement of pigs. There is some pattern there. So they can do something about that. And I'll show you how we deliver that to the stakeholders as well. The way that we deliver that to the stakeholders is to RabApp. RabApp is a web application. It has many other angles, but one of the angles is you're able to go in there and see the farm that is infected, estimate the contribution that that farm is infected by, and estimate as well then how likely this farm is to infect others. Yeah, so that's how the stakeholders have access to the results of the model inside RabApp. So that's that without doing anything, just letting things spread. We understood quite a bit, looking into that, but really we need to be able to do some interventions and try to test them in this system. So what we have done, many things, but I'm going to show you three main results. One is basically represented in this plot where the columns are different companies, different swine production companies, and the horizontal are the number in percentage, number of farms that we basically recreated the whole networks of these companies, and we remove 5% of the farms, and then 10, 15, 20, 25, based on the network location that this farm is within that whole network, to try to demonstrate that if we want to toggle farms based on their relevance in the network, which is the metric that we should be using to rank those farms. So across the board, most advantages, most easy way to do it would be to rank them by degree, which basically is a translation to how well connected that farm is to the others. But in the second position is basically betweenness. So betweenness is a network metric that is basically the intermediate link between two farms. So because how is well vertically integrated these companies, these farms, pigs were moved to one farm, then moved to the other farm. So breaking those farms or removing those farms in the middle there has also a huge impact on reducing the size of possible epidemics. And this is, you can see that, of course, represent the percentage of the number of farms removed. Farms or companies have different sizes, so we cannot assume that every company can do the amount of effort to do surveillance in 25% of the farms or 5% of the farms. So we provide all the scenarios. Another question that this came from our stakeholders was, what would happen if we would basically not allow trucks to go to infected farms to then drive into uninfected farms? How many cases could we avert of PRRS across a full year? This is what's showing here in this plot here for the sow farms. We're going to focus on that one. And the colors here represent the truck types. So we did simulate that. And at the beginning here, when we just are not allowing vehicles that send animals to markets to come to an infected farm, to non-infected farm, only reduce it 2% of cases, because there's not many cooling happening in sow farms. That's why that's so small. But then when we start looking at vehicles that transport people, vehicles that transport pigs, and so on, and all those together, we demonstrated that about 60% of the cases could be avoided if these would take it with full compliance, which is very complicated to do because we're talking about rerouting the whole fleet of trucks here, but the opportunity is there. And then we also look at the amount of farms in the vertical line that vehicles are connecting in 300 days, more or less, okay? And here we are simulating the cleaning probability. So we know when trucks went to a cleaning station, we don't know how good the cleaning was. So it could be 0%, removing the pathogen, 10, 50, 80, 90, and 100. So what we can see right away here is that the vehicles that transport feed connect a lot of farms, almost 1,700 farms, very soon, in very short period of time. So that's because those vehicles are not disinfected very often when they move between farms. Now, the good news is when you look at the farms that receive movements of pigs and trucks transporting pigs to market, when we simulate that very extreme 100% removal of pathogens, you can really see an impact on the amount of farms that those trucks are connecting. So really take-home message is not too bad. If the clean disinfection was 100%, the chances that trucks would have to infect farms indirectly would be reduced. So it makes sense to disinfect trucks at the end of the day. So that's those major interventions there. I want to show you the last one then. We have been so far looking at the networks of pigs, networks of trucks, and trying to avoid those from infected farms, but we haven't looked at what's around the farm. So every farm has biosecurity depending on the farm type. So we haven't been able to look into that. So we started RABAP because of this lack of information on biosecurity at the farm level. So we launched this in 2019. Basically, we started working with companies in one state. Now we are in 17 states. We collect the biosecurity plan. I'm going to show you what that is. And we keep track of that information, which is quite extensive and includes a map to the farm as well. And we are the link between the private and the state animal health officials for the reviewing and approving those plans. And we also maintain a database with animal movement and semen that is used for the modeling, but also used for the emergency response. So a biosecurity plan, what is a biosecurity plan? An SPS plan, my secure poor supply plan, enhanced biosecurity plan, has a written part, 161 items that need to be filled, and a map. Yeah, those two together make a plan. And then what we have done with that, it was a problem because, this is not mandatory, it's a voluntary program, but is something that is being looked into now with the US CHIP, which is the US Swine Health Improvement Plan, as one of the items that farms that are enrolled in that program need to be able to provide within 24 hours of emergency to the state animal health official. So this, that started after we started RABAP, but we now can help that program to excel with this. So we saw the need that we have to create a protocol to collect these biosecurity plans electronically and somehow validate those electronically. So that's how we do, and we done now for this almost 3 years of this program running. So we did that for the written part, which is quite extensive, but we also made it for the maps. So we receive hand-draw maps and we transform those into GIS files, so then we can manage that much better in the system. And then together between those two items, we collect the movement data and then prepare that and link that back to those two other items, so then things are all linked together. And then finally, because of that and because of what we do, we develop the transmission models. We have PERS, PD, and ASF. The ASF model is in revision now. It's been submitted, and we plan to work in CSF and FMD next, but all those to be delivered through the app as well. Where are we at with the RABAP as far as numbers? We have about 52 agreements with companies and clinics across the country. We have 16 Department of Ags that have signed agreements, and some reviewing the agreements. That's because of how data is protected. About 10,000 farms in the system, and the map here representing where we at. The triangle shows the states that are okay with us telling the public that they are on board, and other states don't want to be known. So we respect that as well. So you can see that we are all over the place. The percentage here, the color represents the number of biosecurity plans that we have created per state. Yeah. So since we work with many companies, they have farms all over. So instead of just standardizing the biosecurity plans for the states that we have agreements with the states, we do it for the entire company. Yeah. And that allows us as well to expand our models, because we really need to have enough data in locations to be able to model closely how PERS and PDs is spreading, then to be able to simulate ASF. So in summary, what RABAP is, we work with the companies, with the producers, we collect the data, we prepare that, it's loaded into RABAP, the state and health officials have access to that. They are the ones approving the plans at the end of the day, and they have access to the traceability tool, which is looking at the movement data backward and forward. And here really the goal is, because how emergency works for animal diseases, to move animals from control zones when we do have an emergency, there is requirement for permit to be placed. And if pigs are moving between states, the destination state needs to approve the permit from the source. So this is one less worry for the receiver of the permit to actually look into the biosecurity plan, because they all have access to the data to RABAP. So this is an example. We receive things like this, draw by hand, and those maps are made into a GIS file. Then we can manage it better. And then here we can extract all the features that then we're going to be using in the transmission model to then really try to estimate if having a cleaning station there will have any role in reducing the chances of this farm to become infected or to infect others. So really coming to the end here, what we really are now doing is trying to estimate to this model that we have built now, trying to at least understand 10 of those 169 features. What are those that are very important that gonna actually have the most impact on reducing transmission between farms? So that's what we're gonna be doing next. So we're gonna use that information. We're gonna use some machine learning model in the middle to try to rank the most relevant features that we're gonna use, that gonna be offered then to the transmission model. In this case, we're gonna use our ASF and also PERS model to then estimate the contribution in a large scale fashion. What are the key biosecurity features that would be recommended to have in place? Okay, so it's a large effort to try to make this happen. But we're gonna estimate how each of these 10 features likely to curve the disease spread, looking at PERS and then ASF. And then I also calculate the return on investment, because it's quite expensive to recommend every farm to have a cleaning station where really the gain is not very big. So that's what we're going to be also including in the final estimations of this model. And the plan is to do, we are already working on this one, the PERS and the PD. And once we have that calibrated, then we're going to be using those models to then estimate how these features can, in the future, reduce the spread, the introduction and spread of African swine fever if it enter the US. And with that, I open for questions. I wanted to give you a very high-level overview of everything without getting into detail of one particular project, but rather give you a high-level overview of everything that's happening in our end. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Gustavo, for that incredibly informative presentation. We do have a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So I could read them to you, or if you prefer, that might be the best way. Or you can pull them up. But the first one here is talking about the distance between farms. And it says, would you have to take into account not just distance between farms, but size of farms relative to each other? Size meaning the number of animals that can be housed on a given farm. Just because two farms, say they're 10 miles apart, would think that a farm with more animals on it has the same distance, would be more likely to spread infections than a smaller farm.
Yeah, great question. So in our model, right now we have a gravity model implemented for the local transmission. So it means that a farm with more animals have more force to infect farms have less animals. So it is a function of the number of animals in each farm. Okay, so it's a gravity model. Basically, how bigger you add, more force you have to infect others. And we also have included AVI to these local transmissions. So we look at the amount of vegetation around, between the farms to try to see if that modulates, if that reduces the transmission. We did with and without. We didn't see a huge gain on vegetation. Surprisingly, we have a different publication looking into that specifically. So we're actually moving away from it, and we're moving into a kernel, trying to implement a kernel, which also going to include still the amount of animals in each farm, but we're going to remove this environmental part, which is a complication, because much difficult to calibrate that pathway. So we're going to simplify that. We saw that it was not a huge difference, but still we do sensitivity to make sure that removing that doesn't impact our calibration. So yeah, that's a great one. We've been spending a lot of time trying to remove that or not to remove that, but we decided to go away from the gravity model now for a new version. So
great. Yeah, thanks for the question and the answer. Another question: are there specific reasons why some states wouldn't want information publicized that they're cooperating with the system?
Well, so each state has their state vet, and they have their own decisions that they made, and I never question them why. We work it together with them. So there is some concerns about being in the forefront of things. So yeah, nothing. I'm afraid I cannot give you too much more detail about that one.
Okay. And another one just came in here. Just a thought whether local, regional, state pork price index change ever has been used to correlate with the transmission model.
Well, we have not looked into any the economics and the impacts on the demands. We can see very clearly in the network when basically pigs are transported more heavily. Of course, the end of the year, right? We like to eat pork at the end of the year, so we see a peak on pigs moving it, but not that we have included that in the model. We do have, for the endemic diseases, we do have a seasonality effect that we model. So we know that epidemics start when cold weather starts in the south, the north as well, so different months. So we include that seasonality there for the spread, and it's very important for endemic diseases. So PERS and PD, very clear now is going down. Last year we have a lot of outbreaks still during summer, but it was because a new strain emerged on that year. So often the vets have some time to breathe during summer, and the winter is just fighting outbreaks. Yeah, so we have included that there, and is quite important. But price and demand we have not included. We have not added too much of economics yet. Trying to look into collaboration with some economists to help us on that is something that we're not expert on. We estimate direct values, based on how many pigs going to be dead and things like that, but not to the level that we wanted. So we're looking into that. Not that we have done it.
Yeah, Gustavo, we're actually working on a project at CBTS that looks at the economic impact of ASF outbreak. So maybe we can talk at another time as well.
Yeah.
We have some. I think we have 2 economists on that project that bring some good insight.
Okay.
So yeah, be great to have a conversation off record. Another question: how universal or how much customization will be necessary for different diseases? Are these driven mostly by pathogen biology, for example, transmissibility, or external factors such as weather, wind, etc.?
Wow. So African swine fever is not in the US at the moment, as far as we know, right? So we use the epidemics of porcine epidemic diarrhea from the past. We know how that spread it. So that's what we use to calibrate our epidemic curve. Okay. So we have to, in this simulation model, we have to start somewhere in our parameter spaces. So that's what we use for that. So so far we have been able to calibrate, which means we know where farms are infected. We're able to simulate the transmission. We're able to get the model to understand that pathway, that plot I tried to show you. For PRRS and PD, we're able to do that, yeah, with the same structure, with the same pathways. Of course, we continue to add. So we started just with pigs. Now we have the vehicles, yeah, and now we're looking at the biosecurity to reduce the force of transmission. Yeah, right now we are modeling the Earth plane. We are not modeling the elevation, not modeling anything else, right? So we still need to include that. The problem is, if you try to make it too complicated, then we cannot tease apart what's actually causing the infection. So when developing a model, we spend a lot of time thinking if it's worth it to include another complexity to it, trading, understanding how things are working in the model, and if we're just trying to forecast something, then we don't care about the dynamics, then it's fine. But we really are trying to be very careful how we add things to it, so that we can still control and understand how things are spreading. We are kind of a bit beyond where we should be, to be honest. As far as complexity, we should be much more simpler. But since we work a lot with the companies and our stakeholders to collect the needed information, others don't have that access. So I understand that it's easier to make it simpler because I don't have the data. So we only add things when we actually have the data to calibrate that. So for ASF, for example, since we don't have outbreaks here in the US, our trick is to use PD, because when PD came to the country, the whole population was naive. So we expect it to be similar. And for example, the R0 incubation and those metrics, those timelines of the infection is similar to ASF. It's not the same, similar. So, we hope that that's the best way. To our knowledge, we could take data from countries that are infected, Asia and all that, but their system is quite different. Yeah, they're not so well integrated as here and all that. So need to be careful with that. Yeah, and not that tomorrow we can, turn around and have a model for foot and mouth, from this one. But the base, the constructing from here on is not as much as from ground to here. So we can definitely, it's not too much effort, but we need to be very careful how we reuse this model over and over. And it's public. The GitHub repository is public. If you guys want to look into the codes, is available to everyone. So okay, so that's one. There's more questions.
There is. You kind of touched on the economic impact a little bit. I don't think you addressed that one, but what are the economic impact scales of these different infections? For example, PRRSV, is that less impactful than ASFV on U.S. pork industry?
Mm-hmm. So PRRS is a problem still. Yeah, 20 years. We talked to the vets. They're still frustrated that they cannot control it well. Yeah, estimations is that an outbreak of PRRS in a breeding site costs $600,000 to clean. So multiply that. We have an average 107 new outbreaks every year in the East Coast of PRRS per year. So that's the money there. ASF there is a publication from Iowa actually that look into that, how much they're gonna compound on $50 billion in the first 10 years, the amount of losses and all that. So it is a huge concern. Yeah. So hopefully we never learn exactly how much that's gonna be, but definitely, ASF would be much more worse than the economically than is PRRS, right now. PRRS gives us opportunity to learn more how things are spreading. Yeah, like it's really all the companies, they use a farm outbreak classification from Iowa as well that classify farms from infected, uninfected, stable, and so on. So the industry came together to try to label farms. So it's quite amazing the work that they do together to be able to tell this farm is clean, this farm is not clean. So yeah, it's amazing.
Great. Have you looked at staff background, those that have their own farm and work with pigs?
So unfortunately, no, so far. We have been working, we have many people here in my lab working with the commercial sites right now, and we haven't done all the biosecurity plans yet. So there is projects with Missouri, with the University of Missouri and Ohio, the Ohio State as well, with some pilot work, trying to get more data on those states. But again, it is a bit difficult to work because they are not organized or centralized. Yeah. So then, the overhead to work with them is quite extensive. So hopefully in the future. Right now, we're quite busy with the commercials still. So, but really looking for partnership. And again, this is collaboration with Missouri, University of Minnesota, Ohio, Penn State. We have been working with a lot of people to make it happen. So it's not only my work here.
Great. How frequent are pork farms monitoring on disease such as ASF by the self-submitted sample reporting or state agency testing? Mm-hmm. And whether on-farm testing, wastewater testing like COVID testing was ever implemented?
Great, yeah. So the US SHIP, the program that is mimicking from NPIP, is actually proposing the surveillance now, the surveillance schema for ASF. So depending on how the situation is in the country, going to be if you are enrolled and you are certified, and I can send you the link of the website later to share that. It's becoming a national program. USDA going to lead that starting next year. Yeah. So they are building that. They're still looking at how often that's going to have to be, depending on the infection status. Yeah, like it's going to be once a year, or when a farm is infected within a state, going to be more, things like that. So that's still to be decided. Okay. Of course, if there is suspect cases, if it's a vesicular disease, for example, it triggers an emergency response, and the vets are advised to contact the state health officials, and they would trigger the response to that farm. For example, Seneca Valley is a vesicular disease, very similar to foot and mouth. We cannot differentiate just by clinical signs. So the farm is blocked, and then sample is sent. For ASF, is a very pathogenic PRRS infection. Kind of looks like ASF. You get the pink ear and all that, fever and all that stuff, right? So that triggers some concerns. And of course, if there is suspect cases, the vets are again advised to contact their animal health officials at their state. So, but there is not systematically collections going on right now, as far as I know. And the other one, the wastewater thing, yeah, that's there is work going on right now on that, like looking at that for endemic diseases, yeah, trying to just sample that and see what's in there. And thanks to COVID, that's a new thing that I know there's some projects looking into that. That's a great way to look at it. My take on that one is that the thing is that we're gonna always find virus there for pigs. There's so many pigs and the manure is there for a long time. So I wanted to see the results to see if they can find farms without residual viruses, yeah, because this is a very low, very high flow of animals, yeah, going through. So until you get to zero, it's gonna be a bit difficult. Maybe the cutoff gonna have to be adjusted by that, but it's very interesting work coming out.
The last question we have here is an ASF outbreak would end U.S. pork exports. More than 25% of our pork is exported. So any comment on that?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's estimation. Yeah, like the snowball impact on beef and milk and lamb and everything, right? It's gonna be, and even poultry. Yeah, like if you let the compound after the first year, if we have, we're gonna run out of we're gonna have too much swine and gonna run out of the other commodities and all that. So yeah, that's a quite important. And so far ASF is in the islands, yeah, in Haiti and DR. So USDA has been working a lot there. There's a lot of effort trying to contain it there. Yeah, we don't know of anything else. And if you follow what's happening in Europe, Germany is still fighting. Yeah, it's not moving close to France, but if he goes down there to France, then maybe gonna be a biggest problem for them. But so right now is a big opportunity for the US to continue to export and cash on being uninfected. Yeah, is Europe, it's becoming quite a problem for them.
Another question just came in from Royston. Any thoughts on when disease-resistant swine might be available?
Oh,
question.
I think I read something. I'm not entirely sure, but I saw some notes that has been approved actually for PRRS, and there's some trials going on for a long time, and seems to be something that's coming up. I would be interested on reading more about that and seeing how the general public gonna take that in. GMOs was a big thing in the past. Now we get into the animal GMOs will be a bit it'll be interesting to see what happened there. So yeah, that's would change the whole game. Yeah, like I'm gonna have to be thinking about that because I'm gonna have to change my focus. If no disease are spreading anymore, then maybe I'm gonna be without a job.
And then another one here, are smaller farm size more sustainable, more resilient to outbreak?
Good question. So I know that there is something called the niche markets. So market that are organic and produce those specific meats are now actually being enrolled in some projects across the country. I know of a project of Dr. Arruda in Ohio. She's working with these niche market folks to actually try to understand more, what's happening there, like the pig shows and all those. They are really unknowns, right? We really is because of we need a lot of people to work with that population. It's not like having the companies that they are more systematic, organized. It's the same way for cattle, right? Like the cattle industry is not so centralized, so it's more difficult to work. So there is a huge question there, what's happening in that population, and hopefully people are starting to look into that more and more. It's a very important one. Yeah, if you look at ASF, those are the ones that have the outside pigs, the trees and things like that. They are more exposed to wildlife than the commercial. So I guess the rates of contact with wildlife, if we have, for example, ASF in our feral population, that's the population that you're going to be trying to toggle. The commercial industry, they know how to protect themselves. So good question.
And then, Roy came in and commented on his question on disease-resistant swine with that some can be generated by genome editing instead of GMO. But then we had another question come in as well. Are feral swine impacts, if any, taken into account in your modeling? Reservoirs, disease, et cetera.
So there is not at the moment. We are thinking about doing that. The reason for it is that now states have been working to try to eradicate feral swine from the US. So there is a lot of states that are close to that. That's been funded by USDA. And some states are just mapping where those populations are. So we work here with our state in North Carolina. They are actually in the woods right now collecting that information. Once that becomes available, then absolutely is something to consider. And it'll be tricky to do it, but it's something that we're going to be looking at in the future. And I know of a project as well funded for USDA branch that I think is a 4-year project that they're gonna be working in improving those maps that you probably saw online, where you have actually distribution of the population across the country. And basically that's gonna become available hopefully, within this 4 years project. And that's gonna be very, very important, for us to consider that. So right now the answer is no, but it's something that's that needs to be considered. Yeah, like it is important. We are aware.
Okay, and then everyone came in here. Gustavo, thanks for the presentation. A different question. As for economics, are you planning to look into connections with energy system and pork farms or its overall supply chain?
I'm not sure if I understood correctly, but so we're going to be looking at economics mostly on return of investment. Yeah, how much can we save if we reduce the incidence 5% per year per state? Yeah, for ports, talking about for ports. Yeah, like what's the benefits of that? We are not looking at the energy system per se, but it is. Oh, we're using waste. Okay, I see. Yeah, we have not considered that route. I know there are some folks working on that, and there's a huge push now to consider that as well. Yeah, like the less infection, basically the less infection that you have in your farm, the less you're gonna spend. Not only the animals gonna produce better, gonna be healthier. Therefore, the waste is less when animals are sick. So basically, there's a trade-off there that there's some folks looking into that. Actually, a grant in Minnesota is looking into that.
Okay. We got about 6 minutes left. If anybody wants to come off mute and ask a question that way, or also field those. And these are great questions, by the way. Lots of good questions. But we have 5 minutes left. So Gustavo, thanks again for being here and coming back for the reschedule. Greatly appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Very good questions. Some really interesting ones. Yeah.
Daryl, you have a question?
No, but I just wanted to thank Gustavo. It was a very informative presentation, and we're doing some work in with one of our providers to detect COVID in the human breath. And I know they're doing some testing. Actually, they applied for a grant with USDA for detecting COVID in chickens. So it'd be interesting to see if they can tweak their thing to look at ASF and other viruses in the swine population. Hopefully, bring the cost of my bacon back down. But thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like it to eat bacon as well, cheaper if possible.
Okay. Any other questions before we part ways for the afternoon here?
Appreciate it. And if
Okay.
you can find me online. If you type my name online, gonna come up a website, and we have all the information there, and also available for any further questions. Just hit me an email and I get back to you.
And this presentation, it's recording obviously, so we'll put that on our CBTS website or along with the slides, and yeah, we'll have your information on there as well.
Perfect.
So yeah, thank you again, Gustavo. Greatly appreciate you being here, and thank you everyone for joining. Hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thanks so much. Goodbye.